back. Ooh. Hi, Shelly.
Hi. I can't hear you. Oh, that's funny.
Isn't that crazy? You hear it too, right?
Yeah, it's like this, like we're in the television with the white noise a little bit.
In it with a hurricane.
Yeah. Is that where Connor is right now?
Your voice is, yeah, he's got no voice either. Connor.
Ooh.
Any better?
Yeah.
Yay.
All right. Oh gosh, now I need to get, I can hear you through the computer, but I'm speaking through a microphone. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Weird. No, Rachel is not here.
Rachel's not going to be on.
Okay.
But I think Darrell said she was going to be on, and I don't know about Carol, but I know Allison, you just have a short time. So I'm wondering if we should go ahead and get started.
Yeah.
So the main thing for this is that Connor has an idea for a proposal we could submit to the state for funding, trails funding. And Shelley had a conversation with Shannon and Matt with the planning department last week. And after that, it seemed like we got some direction from Shannon, and Connor wants to give you an idea of what he's thinking of and see what you think and if you want him to go forward. Is that right, Connor?
Yeah, pretty much it. Just want to get would love to make sure everybody's comfortable with the idea of trying to move a project forward with a grant proposal this year, given the constraints of sort of what we discussed, what we've looked at. I know Shelly, Sarah, and I have spent a lot of time looking at stuff, walking, tracking, putting pen on maps, and kind of brainstorming. And then we kind of distilled that down to two options that we thought would be good proposals for this year if we could pull them together in time. And presented those to Shannon last week. And Shannon gave us some feedback and ultimately said, like, you guys can move forward with the proposal. And, you just need to continue to work together on it. And his feedback ended up being pretty good in one area in particular, which was like the route. We had kind of the Bozeman connector extension, if you will, towards PFL was one option we had discussed. The other one being kind of a reservoir park loop that goes up from, kind of connects the P and the Trout area, kind of a U-shaped loop that would then ultimately kind of feed back into Reservoir Park, where the new dog park is slated to be in the next nearish future. So we thought that was a really exciting option, but Shannon did say, like, well, we'd probably want to, but we would need to have some sort of public comment and talk with the homeowners in the area. And it would probably end up needing to get some pretty thorough, some thorough time to have people share their piece and make sure that we were good to go with, I guess, the concerns of where the trail would run. And I felt like that was a pretty good, or Gene and I and Shelly all kind of, I think, during that conversation realized, like, probably more than we can chew for the time period that we have, a little bit more than we want to go for. So we ended up thinking, and I think Shannon would agree, that I think the project that we'd be most likely to get any money for and proceed with funding would be a Bozeman connector extension towards PFL on the easement that the city already owns. It's all surrounded by one single landowner, which is the development company that owns the land. And that's kind of where, and that is where that I think we would focus and propose or submit a proposal for funding to extend that by TBD amount of distance, but kind of discuss what I guess we would want to bring that up and discuss some of the details. But I guess for the sake of this call, wanted to say like that's where we're leaning towards submitting a proposal, and wanted to make sure that everyone here was okay with that, good to move forward, and I guess essentially just get buy-in, make sure we're all good with where we're going.
Connor, you don't have the map, do you?
Yeah, it's a pretty rough map, but I can.
Or Sarah sent one around this afternoon that could
Earth
be.
maps.
Yeah, let's see what Sarah's map says here.
While you guys are looking for maps, can I just ask a question? How does it work when you want to have a trail go through and you do ask landowners, and some say, yeah, we want this, and some say no? Does one landowner saying no, I don't want this, kind of nix the project, or you have like a majority vote or something amongst the homeowners? How's that work?
Are you referring in particular like to the one by the P?
Yeah, just like, or any proposed,
Yeah.
new trail, or
Normally-
like,
Well, first of all, what Connor proposed by the P is actually all on city property.
yeah,
It is.
Okay, so that's one thing to keep in mind. The city could do anything it wants on its own property. They will want to know what the public thinks, and if there was a huge outcry, my guess is we'd have a tough time getting them to approve that. If there was one landowner without a lot of good reasons for why they opposed it, we'd have to make our pitch to the city commission.
okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, so the two options we talked about. This one.
Can you zoom in, Connor?
Oh yeah, let's see if we can. Let me actually see.
So just so can I just give you an introduction to this map of what this is?
Go ahead.
So
Go ahead, Sarah.
What's that? Oh, it's just so just to give a little update, is it their GPX files, pretty much all of it, except for some of the pink, is on city land. Even the yellow is on city land. And the M Street, that's Summit right of way, and it goes down to E Street right away along Montana Street.
Yeah.
So that's all.
There's a lot of really cool stuff over here, and I think there's a lot of opportunity to develop. I think that's where something like Shannon kind of said this, and I think there's a lot of merit to it, is just getting that parks or the trails master plan in place that sort of guides the defining document for us for some of these future projects, and we have more time to pull some of these things together and have some conversations. And all over here is super cool. But what we're talking about, is over here on the pink. Sarah went over here, and this is where, over here is where the current Bozeman Connector Trail ends, and this is the easement route here. So the proposal would be to do something out into this area, probably as like a phase one of sorts. And then we'd even batted around the idea of like, what if we added some sort of like pavilion or picnic option, your picnic area at the parking area over here that turns it into like, you can park here, because there's cars parked out there pretty frequently. So people could come out here, park and walk and, you know, go this way or go this way, and then have like a little picnic spot on the edge of that big pond. It could be kind of fun. It could turn it into a little bit more of a destination than it currently is, I guess. But that's the thought for kind of where we had discussed going with this. The only downside of something like this one was Shannon did say this is an easement that if an eventual train crossing goes over here, this would likely become a road. So that's the only hesitation that we had with whether or not to move forward with something like this, in case for the first time in 150 years, they decide to build a crossing here in town, and it goes out here. So
Can the city do that? A land that was given for a trail easement turns into a road?
No, the city owns that property.
I know, but it was,
They
it was
bought
given-
it with the intention that a road and to a crossing could go there.
it wasn't for a trail.
No. And I think Shannon didn't, or Connor, didn't Shannon say he thought the right of way was 60 to 80 feet?
he did. He said he thought it was a pretty wide right of way, which would potentially leave room for a trail, whether that's paved or like
Right.
a dedicated sidewalk, off-street space that can become, it wouldn't be obviously a replacement for this, but it would be something to facilitate active transportation alongside the new road. So
I think the challenge with this location is that, first of all, it dead ends at the railroad tracks.
Yeah.
Which they might not be excited about because we don't have an easement along the railroad tracks. So unless we can come up with a proposal that extends that, it pretty much dead ends at the railroad tracks. But the other thing is, given that this is a potential right of way for the railroad crossing, you're essentially asking what could be a temporary trail. Shannon thought this was an easier sell because it's fairly flat, unlike on the hill. He said, I'm not really sure how we would get equipment in there right away.
yeah, that was
Where? Sorry, equipment into where? The long piece?
No, along by the fish. It's
Yeah.
just steep. He said we would have to really do some work to get equipment in there and to maintain in there
I
right
mean,
now.
we walked it with, and a mini excavator can work its way through there. It's not, I don't think it's a problem. I mean, if
It
you
would only be like
if
one.
you see what they're doing up in the crazies right now, this is not steep.
It's true. Yeah, it wouldn't be the craziest trail to build, but there would be some tight spots. Definitely potentially logistically challenging, but probably nothing over the top.
I'd say the erosion would be a bigger problem.
Yeah.
Well, I
because
think, and Shannon really did want conversations with the landowners, which we don't really have time.
Yeah, given that this would be like a proposal from the city of Livingston, we would need to play by the rules we're given with in that regard. So,
But I like the idea of getting people parking at the end of Ridgeway Drive there, being able to then walk around to the park, Reservoir Park, where the dog park should go. It's a nice alternative that gives a little bit more walking.
yeah, I think it would be really cool. And this would be the route. This is the trail I would want to build if we had, if we could build one, if we had just the choice. But, and I guess to kind of expound on some of the concerns too, is like, you know, Shannon really was like, you know, I think the ideal scenario is that we wait to pursue any of these until we have the plan done. But that wouldn't be until the end of next year, probably. In which case, you know, we would be looking to apply in 2022 for funding, you know, or I guess by the time the calendar year rolls around 2023. So if we were to wait until something else came up, you know, in terms of active transportation plan, and we have this supporting document that guides these things, it's like that's all and good, but like we burn 2 years of like even pursuing funding through these programs. So that's kind
I
of
think,
the concern I have on the other side of it. So
yeah, I totally agree with you, Connor. And I also think if we're looking at neighborhoods being built right now, that development by Fleshman Trail is just,
Cutting in and
and
out.
then that development up on the north. Oh, what is going on with my phone? Dang it.
Now you're better.
we're pretty good now.
What were you saying about the neighborhoods, Allison?
You're on mute.
Yeah, can't hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
Dang it, Allison. Well, I'd just like to add a comment. When we were doing a lot of these routes, I just want to let you know that you do get concerned neighbors. And as soon as you start flagging stuff, people are going to think development's coming. So that public process, absolutely. You know, we had one guy come out of his, you know, his house and wanted to let us know that everyone's kind of watching us walk back there. And that was along the M Street, where you have a lot of those properties that kind of go up into the foothills. So absolutely, letting people know that we're going to build a trail and improve the value of their properties and not build a big apartment complex or something
Right. Yeah.
would be useful. I'd say the only one that wouldn't have as many problems is the blue route. Except for coming, you know, this coming up and around like track 5 where it says that, like that area, you could see a lot of neighbors that were coming out of their houses and, you know, what's going on and whatever. But the blue route back there, there's only, you know, 2 or 3 neighbors. It would be easier than, you know, than I think the yellow one, but you never know. You never know who they are. But I just wanted to say I support that already.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Allison. You're here. You're here again.
Hey, I'm here. So I was just thinking related to like neighbors and development. I think since that like northwest side of town is expanding so much, it would be super great to be able to expand Bozeman Connector Trail sooner than later. And I don't think we should hold off on attempting to get money until the plan is ready. I think we just go with Shannon's plan, Connor's plan, and Shannon's approval to just like expand that trail. And because all this whole area is already all developed, like this map is lacking so many houses. I was just going to say, related to the blue and red and yellow and orange trails, at some point I have to make a flyer related to the dog park. And we had talked about getting Steve to create like a picture of what that could look like. And maybe we should be including potential ideas for trails in that flyer that will be put into people's mailboxes.
I like that idea, Allison.
Yeah, it'd be a great way to sort of start the conversation.
Yeah.
And not necessarily blindside people when the day
Right.
comes, you know, hopefully in a year or 2 years when we're like, okay, we have some momentum in this thing. We actually passed a special improvement district for the park, you know, or a parks district, and we have,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
for 2050.
And Shannon, Allison, excuse me, while we're on this, just a real quick question. Have you talked to Durrell or anyone else about that 50,000 that was originally proposed for the dog park?
I haven't yet because I've been focused on a class that I'm writing right now. So I was hoping that you might have some insight and then I was going to reach out to them in the next week.
Yeah, the city commission will be taking it up again tomorrow night.
Okay.
If you look at their packet for tomorrow, there's actually an addendum with a corrected amount that's currently available since the city or the state cut off some funding to the cities. There's now $700,000 left in the CARES Act reimbursement and a whole bunch of projects that haven't been funded. If we're not out there advocating for this, my guess is this won't get funded.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so that's why I was hoping Darrell would be on the call to find out what we need to do. I mean, it could be that we have to go to the city commission and push for this if you want that 50,000.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it would make life a lot easier. So you're recommending I email Darrell.
Email or call her and just say, you know, what's the likelihood of that getting funded? Because you're competing against a lot of other things.
Right.
But I do think, given what you've looked at, I mean, given these trails, given what you've got for cash match and fencing, there might be an opportunity to show that there's some real opportunity here.
Support. Yeah. Totally. Okay.
You might want to actually just forward your proposal to the city commission, because I know they were asking, they're saying they got a lot of pushback, you know, on what the funding was spent on. And then they're like, well, what are the alternatives, right? And that's when
Right.
our dog park was in there. So I
Yeah.
think even just emailing that to the commission and saying, this is our project, and then we're looking for partial match.
Yeah.
would have better, and even a word of why it helps our community from a.
Well, you
social-
have that in that one pager, Allison.
Right. Exactly. That's what I was just thinking. Yeah. Okay.
So then you
course.
look at putting these trails in there.
Yeah, that's
and-
what I was. Is that okay, Sarah, if I use this map with that one-page proposal that we had shared with Sarah, with Shannon, and just say there's a lot of potential for connectivity in this space?
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay.
That's a rough idea.
Yeah, totally.
And you can, yeah,
Great. Okay.
that's a great idea.
Cool. I really like that idea. Starting to plant the seeds of that now.
Mhm.
I think that's a really good play. Something else Shannon mentioned, I just want to bring it up here and see if there's any interest in see what we can, how far down the field we can take something like this. But you mentioned like there's a bunch of kind of unofficial trails out here behind the water tower, and it all kind of does connect back through to this city land eventually. But he said, like, what if we talked to the landowner and just talked about like formalizing, or not necessarily formalizing, but I guess asking for some approval to start using some of those trails. And not that we would necessarily sign them, but somehow, some way have a level of permission given, I guess, to people to go walk their dogs and use some of that space back there. Again, not necessarily anything to be written in stone, I guess, but that's something that we should. I think it'd be worth pursuing at some point. Start a conversation with the landowner and see what the lay of the land is like, because I think it could be cool to have, like, yeah, you know, kicking off here, you can go this up here and loop back around eventually.
Mhm.
He thought that the owner, Kevin Cook, would be amenable if he was protected liability wise.
Mhm.
So we were discussing a little bit, Jean, on, we were more talking about like HRDC and Pocock and Northtown, and connecting this little section with our Bozeman Trail, Bitterroot Trail and Bozeman Connector. you know, there's 3 or 4 landowners in there, and we contacted Courtney to ask what that process was, and she kind of made it sound that the city first has to be interested. So if I understand it correctly, we as Parks and Trails, if we want to take the liability, I don't know if there's another option to take, who takes the liability. Parks and Trails would provide a case and say, this is the trail network. These are the landowners. The city then has to agree that they have interest in taking on that liability. And then we would approach the landowners.
Yeah, I think the difficulty we're in right now is Shannon, as Connor and Shelley can attest, will point to the fact that we're just now developing a trails and AT plan. And he will constantly come back and ask us, what are our priorities? I mean, we can be all over the map on this area and this area and this area. He's going to want to know, and so's the city, what are our priorities? And of course, that's what the whole trails and AT plan is supposed to help us decide. So if we want to, like, if we wanted to just secure the summit trail or develop a new trail, whatever we want to do, we'd have to lay out what's needed based on what the planning department or the city attorney says, and then make our case to, I would say the city staff first, because if they go to the city commission or comment during the city commission and say, well, that doesn't really work because of this, it just doesn't help our case.
I also don't want to get in a position, what you're seeing, you know, with this growth policy stuff is that they make decision, like they put the Voyage property or whatever and say, this is an area for development. And then private landowners get really upset because we've put a trail through their property without proper consultation or. So I don't like, when we get to the trails master plan, I don't want to get to a point where we've like put trails, connectivity trails through multiple property owners without that discussion. And I'm not sure if it's like, I guess the city staff would be the people we need to get on board with and say, these are our priorities. Do you agree? And then approach the city, and then approach, the private landowners.
Well, and there will be a public process for this trails and AT plan.
Yeah. I just don't want them to get caught off guard. Like,
Right.
Here's a map. We've decided.
Right. Right. So I think I think the reason this was a little bit of a struggle to figure out, okay, the deadline's February 1st, I guess it is. What's our priority, you know? And we're trying to pick out something that is doable. That's why I like the Bozeman connector extension, because it's not, I mean, the corridor's there, it's used, it's flat, you know. There's not landowners except the Absaroka Vista landowner there on both sides.
I also like the idea of making it a trail, and if you create enough ownership, people won't want to get rid of it to make a road.
Or they'll make sure trails next to the road.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not ideal, but there's other bigger issues with that railroad crossing. So then the question, Sarah, is I see you, I mean, you have the pink along the railroad tracks.
Yeah.
That's I'm assuming not in the railroad right away.
I'm trespassing. Yeah.
Okay, all
Then
right.
you get on Eglin property. What is cool though is so that point where the pink ends on the west side, that is the corner of DNRC public land property. So I know that access isn't legal, but if you go straight north to Fleshman Creek Road, and this is future stuff, but that does overlap and that could be access. So then this southern piece would be the piece that if you're trying to do a loop, but that's just future, but it's always good to think about where these trails are going. Has anybody been to the end of this, the end of where this trail ends, where it dead ends extensively? Have you guys ever been there?
No.
No.
So I was actually really surprised to see there's an at-grade crossing. There's a couple gates. It's a road that's been used. Looks like somebody's been using it. And then there, as you can see, the road starts and it crosses a little bit of Eggland property, but it jumps right onto city property or county property. I'm not sure, with a highway right away, probably state right away.
Oh, I know the Egglands. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then so once you just get it's a little tiny sliver, and who knows, maybe it doesn't cross. It's just what it looks like on Onyx and the cadastral. Then you're connected to Highway 10 and there's already a road there. And you're right across from Bell. So I
Yeah.
thought that it'd be a whole, I was surprised. I was like, oh my gosh, there's already a road here and an at-grade crossing. I mean, I don't know about sending people over it right now, but that whole dog leg or that whole thing, it's built for a trail, right? There's already a trail there. Like it's already bermed up. There's an old cattle trail. It's really kind of a no-brainer.
You know,
Yeah.
one thing, Connor, is you could talk about what the options are in the future, so it doesn't look like just a dead end. And
Right.
nothing
Yeah.
else is gonna
Oh,
happen.
I'm willing to paint a very bright future for this property. Yeah, there's a lot we can share, but frankly, turning this into Copper City 2.0 would be like a huge dream. But I don't think that's necessarily going to happen. I don't know how big that parcel is, state land anyways, but it'd be really cool to turn this into like a recreational destination out here. Something to do near city limits, but like has access from fun trails. But yeah, this would be pretty easy to say, yeah, this, you know, this is a loop, this is a future community for people who on this side, and people who get to PFL, like they get to ride their bike to PFL here, or you know, they need to go pick up lumber on their way home on their bicycle. They can go to Canyon Noble and take the future bike path that we're going to build back to town and loop back into the connections that we already have made to get south on 89 and back into town, downtown and beyond. So I think there's a story to tell. There's a compelling story to tell. It's just hopefully people who are taking these applications can see pictures of the future, not necessarily the present state.
Does the trail grant need to be, is it like a connecting trail, or?
No, it can be, this is the new trail stewardship. So it could be for new trails or maintenance,
Well,
whatever, but there is a little bit of a match required by the city. And my suggestion to Connor was, if we got the committee that liked this idea, that he could flesh it out more and make sure Mike Cardos knows about it. So that if he has heartburn because of some plans we're not aware of, we know sooner rather than later. But Shannon didn't have an objection.
yeah, his biggest thing was maintenance.
Hey guys, I'm sorry to interrupt. I have to head out, but Connor and Sarah and Shelly, thanks so much for making this map. It's awesome. I love the Bozeman Connector Trail extension idea. And Jeannie, I will reach out to Darrell about the dog park.
If you need help, let me know.
Okay, great.
Right,
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.
And it looks like Carol is on too, so.
Yep, she helped on here.
The only reason that I said is because, you know, there were other parts of the Bitterroot Trail, and then following, like going around the armory, you know, I followed public city land, but it's just really unclear, and it's kind of like on our map, but it's not delineated, and it could use some proper like scraping out and showing that it's a trail.
Like you're talking like this section
one.
right here.
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah. I can't argue that. It's super confusing. Sort of trail just sort of appears and disappears at really random spots. It's not amazing.
Unless you have a paid app, you don't know if
Right.
you're on city land or not.
Or if you're just trusting that your gut is right and you're running on public land, you know, you just feel the public land underneath your feet. So
Right.
not super helpful. But yeah, this is another, I mean, there's just so many spots we could improve.
Do we have a contact for Absorca LLC?
I don't, but I'm sure Matt must in the planning department.
Because it'd be really great to see how we could elaborate on this. trail. If he's like, no ways, or if we kind of can use our vision, like you say, Connor, because then we could go walk this more intentionally in what that trail would look like. Phase one
But it
being,
is city property.
the one line is sure, but not, I mean, it's kind of like we run into the problem, I think I'm commenting on, that it's a trail that just dead ends.
Yeah, yeah.
And where do you go from there? You either have to cross the tracks or you have to go along Egland in one way or another.
You know, the train does whistle at that crossing. It's not a totally, you know, on your own crossing.
It would be really great if we could get that crossing on bike.
Yeah, because what if we, I mean,
So
To-
Connor, would you be interested in just following up with Matt about that landowner or whatever, and then with Mike Cardos?
yeah, I'll start with Matt. The landowner being Zorka.
Yeah, Absorca Vista.
Yeah, okay. Should we open a conversation up with the end of the road too? I mean, end of the path, just like,
For Egland
yeah,
and
Or-
crossing.
Well, Alice had said she knew the Eglin family, so,
That's their little homestead down with the big little lake.
this thing,
Yep.
okay.
Their property, it was just like the tail end of their property. It would be worth speaking with Matthew and asking if they're even involved. Because it's just like a little tiny fork that we might have to get a right of way across, but.
Yeah, I'll start a conversation with Matthew about landowners, like the end of the trail. And then Gene, I'll follow up with you. He's been really responsive on emails, so I'll just shoot him an email tonight and I'll probably get something tomorrow. And then we can take that where it needs to go, and then we can make a game plan to talk with Cardos.
okay. Sounds good.
Cool.
Anything else on this for now? I just do have a couple quick updates for folks.
Are we aiming for just a natural trail, not a paved trail, right?
Correct. Natural. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not asking for funding for pavement.
Yeah,
Great.
Livingston's already hot on the paved trail topic here with the other trail application for Alpenglow. So we'll just stick with dirt and rock.
It's so expensive.
Yeah,
And the
Yeah.
maintenance that the city's doing at the moment on paved trails is not great.
Yeah, and for 50K, like because the max of the grant that we would go through is the new stewardship program, and it's 50K max. So
And what's the match?
10%. So it's actually pretty small,
Can we
but
do
up to
in-
7% of the grant can be used for administrative.
and you can do it in kind.
in kind? Okay.
I believe so. Yeah, I'd have to double check, but I'm pretty sure both grants were like RTP and the stewardship were both in kind options.
Okay.
And so as Connor mentioned, RTP, the Livingston Healthcare is going to go ahead with resubmitting their proposal. We had another call with them last week as well. They met with the grant administrator who told them what got rated down on their application last year. So now they know what they need to address, which is a lot more detail about the trail and about long-term maintenance. So they're going to go ahead with that grant proposal for the recreational trails program, which is why we're not applying for that one, just so we're not competing with them. We're going for this new trail stewardship proposal. So let's see, and just so you know, the Trails and Active Transportation Plan, thanks for sending around the link for that, Sarah. That will start moving in January, and we're invited to participate in the review of the applications, which is really good, that we can participate. Sarah, I guess my one concern is I would really like to know who from, I think he mentioned Active Transportation Coalition would be consulted on this. I just want to make sure you guys are in the loop on that as far as ATC goes.
We're not, we haven't heard anything officially, and I saw on the scope of works where it mentions city boards. but it wasn't specific to the coalition.
Well, it did mention ATC.
Oh, did it? Then I missed
Yeah.
it.
So ATC won't be on the review committee for picking the consultant. And I asked Shannon about that and he said it's just because they're not a city advisory,
Yeah, that's fine.
Committee?
That makes-
but you are include ATC. I say you because you're the one sort of representing ATC these days and a lot of other hats. But that they will be consulted for the actual scope of work and
Oh,
how to
good.
move forward.
Oh,
So,
that's a relief. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
a relief because I thought that had been decided already. So that there will be another process once, I guess, they get bids from consultants, then there'll be a finalization of the scope of works.
I think so, and there certainly will be a lot of outreach as far as what actually it entails. There's a lot of stuff they have to go through there. So I have reiterated with both Shannon and Darrell that we don't want our entire 50,000 used for this grant.
Good.
I'm doing the best I can to make sure that happens. My feeling is we need the signs, the identifying signs. We want the branding for the Parks and Trails system. And I also pointed out that since the active transportation plan was in the city strategic plan for 2022, that meant to me that the city assumed they would be using general fund money for that. So even though we're a year in advance, I certainly think they could use some of that. So we have a little bit left for some of our other work. So to the extent any of you can reinforce that, I would, because I really don't want the whole 50,000 used.
Agreed.
Plan. And I reiterated that with Darrell on Sunday. I was hoping, she said she was going to be on the call. So I was hoping she'd be on the call and we could see what she thought, but she's not on the call. So.
Okay.
And then the last thing is just those projects for CARES Act funding. The other ones besides the dog park, remember, we're like repairing more of the Highway 89 South Trail, the lagoon floating islands, the improvements to Sacagawea Park, Mark's In and Out neighbor lot there, but also the AT crossings, Sarah. So that's another thing. I don't know where the funding is if it doesn't come through that CARES Act reimbursement money.
The AT crossing at Marks Out or just, or
Just
along Park
AT
Street?
crossings, yeah.
The Park Street, that came from, I mean, Mike made it sound like they already had funding for that a long time ago.
I thought so too. So you might want to make sure on that, only because they did have it in that CARES Act list.
They did, you're right. Yeah.
And so if they don't get funding from that, do they actually have the money? So that's the only thing. I don't know where we're at with that CARES Act funding, so.
Okay. I wanted to ask about changing our meeting times.
We can.
A couple people have expressed, because we've got parents, I'm not a parent, so I speak on behalf of other people, that this is the primary time for kids and dinner making. And if we're doing Zoom calls and we're working remotely, if it would be more convenient to meet in work hours or when kids are at school, or I don't know, I don't have kids. So I'm just putting that out there because I know I see a lot of people not being able to participate in these meetings as well as city commission meetings because they're moms.
Yeah, I think the difficulty is the people who do work. Like, I don't know, Connor, how easy it would be for you to get away for 2 hours in the middle of the day. I know Allison would have a lot of difficulty.
Yeah.
So would Gavin have if he was on the committee? The other difficulty is I have found it really difficult for the public to show up at meetings if they're during the day.
Right.
We can move the time forward. I'm not sure that helps.
Okay. I'll defer to everybody else on that. Maybe I'll ask Allison and Rachel too. They have ideas or thoughts.
Yeah, the city commission used to meet at 6 and they moved it up to 5:30. I know others meet at the noon hour. That doesn't give us enough time to get through our work.
Yeah, tree board. is the
We
only one.
never, an hour we'd never get it done.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So think about it.
Okay.
time is, yeah, I agree with you, Jean. I think it'd be hard for people to get together during the day. It's not ideal. It is supper time, but it doesn't happen very often. So
It's usually once a month. We just had this
Yeah.
special meeting because we're not meeting later in December.
yeah, I just can't think of a better day or time to move to, you know.
Okay. I guess think about it.
Yeah,
The new year, maybe there isn't one, but I thought I'd put that out there. Because we have two
Yeah.
people that aren't here today because of it, you know?
well, it wasn't our scheduled time, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do want to make sure we are making it possible for the public to participate.
That's true.
Yes.
Yep.
Those crowds that show up every meeting.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's how
Or
Shelley came. Shelley started coming to our meetings,
Yeah, that's true.
and Sarah. So, yeah, but I mean, we can think about it, but I do want to be respectful of the public, plus I don't want to eliminate people who have full-time jobs. Gavin, for example, worked in Bozeman.
Oh,
He couldn't do it before 6.
I mean, it's actually easier now that we're doing Zoom meetings. It's easier to make it work, you know, because my daughter's in the next room and that's it, you know, easy.
yeah.
Let me
You don't have
just
to go anywhere.
let me just relay a couple of things Rachel brought up. One was that AmeriCorps group that she's working with. Sarah, I think you're working with her on PCEC, but looking at having some people come and help with some maintenance or projects we might have. The challenge is we need someone on the committee who has the time to work with them. So if we have projects for the summer that we would like to propose, Shannon asked her if we had any. We could propose some for this group of people. They could be here for 6 weeks or longer, do stuff, 10 people. So, and they could be split up among different projects. So,
You're saying like dedicated, like part of their time be for Parks and Trails projects, or like 10 people for 6 weeks.
well, you could
Give the orders.
split them up have 2 people for the whole time, or have
Okay.
5 people. I think 10 people are coming. 5 people for a shorter period. It's whatever the project is. And I think she's trying to build a whole network of needs. So there's a variety of potential experiences.
Cool. Sure, we'll find something.
Like remember the church group that came 2 different summers, and Mike Gomez was the contact for them, and they built picnic tables, they painted them, they redid the rec center's big stand that blocks people off from Summerfest, where they took tickets and stuff like that. They did a variety of maintenance projects. So that's the kind of thing, if you knew you had something you wanted them to do, we could look at doing that. So that was one thing she brought up. The other thing was, we had a discussion about parks, and this will be for another meeting, maybe in January, but the Trails and Active Transportation Plan isn't going to cover parks. We don't have anything that identifies what are the priorities or the long-term plans for different parks. And her question was about Mike Webb Park and additional stuff that's going in there. Is there a long-term plan? Has there been consultation with the public and the neighborhood? That would be the case for Sacagawea Park, where there was $50,000 proposed for CARES Act funding. I don't know what that would be for, but we've also been asked about Mayor's Landing. And so part of our discussion was, could we start looking at developing specific park plans that involve public input and helped create long-term plans for some of these areas, maybe starting with a few of them. So.
Would we be able to do like park design standards? And that could be like trail standards too, and even like process like a I don't know, maintenance addition process where they have to consult public, or that we want, natural features or artwork to be considered or historical, whatever. And I'm wondering if that can't just be, if we're going to do it with the trails plan, like trail design standards, that we couldn't just extend that to parks being similar. I don't know. It might be too much of a stretch, but
Well, I don't know, Billings has parks plans for every single one of their parks.
isn't that more of a plan? Like, it's more like, we'd have to invest in another plan, a park plan.
Well, not if maybe if we bid it off one by one. Like we said, okay, G Street or Mike Webb Park has a group funding them, but there's been no public outreach except to come to us.
Who decides? Because they are really crappy playground design.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering too. Like,
At Mike Webb?
yeah, how who buys the stuff and decides on this? Because I wouldn't pick. That's not what I'd pick.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think because the Rotary's involved with it, they probably go to either Eric or Shannon, but we've not been involved with any of that.
Right.
Except to get an update after the decision. So my thought, and remember, when Sarah Schofield came to our committee, I don't know if it was last year, or must have been the year before COVID. I asked her if there had been any outreach to the neighborhood about the whole concept of what was going in there and the style, etc. And she said, no, we left that up to the city commission, and Darrell was there. And I asked Darrell and she said, well, I didn't know that. So there's a little breakdown in communication. We can fix that by saying, here's the process we would like to engage in.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had, moms that say, they ask the same question, like who's picking these things, and why don't we, all of a sudden there's playground equipment going in and nobody really had any idea, and it's not what anybody would have chosen.
Yeah.
You think we could write it, actually? I mean, I don't think it'd be that complicated. I think we could do a parks design and process policy.
We could.
I think
we could develop it and present it.
I think we should.
Say, we just want to address it. So it's just like we did with the naming policy. We came up with stuff and they passed it.
Yeah,
they passed it.
I think, oh, good. Thank God. Yeah, let's do that, because Rachel's also hot on the tail of that.
Yeah. Well, I understand that, because that isn't actually what was in the master plan either. The master plan envisioned a natural park at Mike Webb. So I think it's timely. We don't have to talk about it tonight. I just wanted to raise it because Rachel brought it up tonight when I talked to her, because she said she wouldn't be able to make the call, that we should be thinking about how do we address the long-term plans and needs for the individual parks and involve the public.
100%.
So Sarah, maybe you can help with that.
Yeah, sounds like I did.
I'm happy to help.
Yeah, I think we could. And it doesn't have to be overcomplicated. I wanted to ask one more question, and that is just of these whole right-of-ways, and as we're designing trails and trying to create loops, Fleshman Creek, you would know this, Jean. Is there no way to put a trail along Fleshman Creek? Is there not, like, I don't know, some leeway on the boundary of Fleshman Creek that you could put a trail down it, or is that kind of off limits?
Are you talking about off the road?
No, not Fleshman Creek Road, the creek itself. You know how there's little trail systems more down on the south side. And I was like, why can't this just go all the way through to Mayor's? Or is it?
Oh, all the way through town? Oh boy, now you're really digging. It's funny because Shannon asked us on the call with Connor and Shelley about other ideas, like he mentioned Myers Riverview Trail, and he mentioned, like, we've had Rod Lee, with the bowling alley and PFL, etc. But he also mentioned the trail at Miles Park to Mayor's Landing. And I said, well, we've had lots of discussions over 20 years about it, but we don't have agreement from either the golf course or the Longs to send it along the river. We could go along the county property and the school property, but we'd go out to View Vista again is our only option at this point. But there's clear interest in trying to connect more trails. I don't think the right of way for Fleshman Creek itself is wide enough, and because it goes through backyards through town, I think we'd have a tough time there.
It would be, but I do, yeah, I think you're right, because they've tried to block it off anyway, and I think that would be-
Encroachment.
yeah, and then, but you are right, and I keep meaning to bring this up, is that berm between View Vista and the golf course, there should be a trail there, you know? There should be a trail there. It's kind of naturally or there's supposed to be some clearing and stuff that needs to happen, but getting people off the road. And then also away from the two property owners on the other side, who are very angry, who threatened to shoot my dog, you know, if that happened again. And they live right next to the leash your dog, but then they've got a very aggressive German Shepherd, and but
Right.
they're not willing to put the German, you know, to not have a reactive dog, so it becomes your dog's fault. So
So there's two areas we could address that. One is the trails and AT plan. But because the city wants us to move forward, and Shannon did bring this up as well about Mayor's Landing. What do we want to do about Mayor's Landing? That's a good place to talk about access. And so that's a process we might want to start this winter, spring. A public process to see what people want to see at Mayor's Landing. And access.
yeah,
So-
okay.
So just park stuff is something we should think about as well.
Parks policy.
Yeah.
I'll tell Rachel now, she's doing it.
Okay, good. All right, anything else? And thank you for doing this at last minute. We just, because of the deadline for this grant, we just had to schedule something fairly quickly, so thank you. Anything else from anybody? Okay, as far as I know, we don't need another call, work session, or meeting till January.
Connor, keep me in the loop with stuff and how, like, if we're gonna do that grant. And I don't know if you've got city people that are willing to help with that, if Lisa's getting involved in that, or if we need another GPX file. Because I think there's a more ideal trail around there. Let me know.
Good. Yeah, you'll be hearing from me.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, thanks,
Thank-
everybody. Have a good holiday.
Thanks.
All right.
You too.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.
Bye.